The fall from the sky. The sky was on fire. Human pilot Eli Ward struggled to control his burning ship as it fell through the thick red clouds of planet Xurian 9. Sparks flew across the cockpit. Warning lights blinked everywhere. The enemy had hit him hard during the battle. Now he was falling into enemy land, alone and wounded. Mayday! Mayday! This is Captain Eli Ward. Ship down, requesting emergency pickup, he said into the radio, but there was no answer. Just static. He looked down. Trees with glowing blue leaves covered the surface of the planet. The jungle below looked strange, alive, dangerous. He took a deep breath and pulled the control lever one last time. The ship crashed. Metal tore through trees. Fire burst from the engines. When the wreckage finally stopped, everything was silent, except for the sound of burning. Eli groaned in pain. His leg was hurt, and blood ran down his arm. He crawled out of the wreckage, using one hand to pull himself forward. His vision was blurry, but he knew one thing: he had to move. The Velari, the alien race ruling this planet, would come soon. And if they found him, he was dead. He limped into the jungle, each step slow and painful. His breathing was heavy. The air was thick and smelled sweet but strange. Somewhere in the trees, something moved. A low growl echoed through the shadows. Eli froze. Was it a wild animal, or something worse? His heart pounded in his chest. Suddenly, he heard voices. Not human. Harsh, clicking sounds. Velari soldiers. They were close. Their glowing armor lit the forest like ghostly lanterns. Eli dropped to the ground behind a thick root. He held his breath. He had no weapon, no strength, and no plan. The soldiers came closer. One of them scanned the area with a red laser light. It passed just inches from Eli's face. He closed his eyes. Then, out of nowhere, a soft hand touched his shoulder. A voice whispered in his ear, "You're safe now, human. Just close your eyes." Eli opened his eyes in shock. A tall figure knelt beside him. A Velari woman. But unlike the soldiers, she wore no armor. Her skin glowed a soft silver blue, and her eyes were deep and kind. He tried to speak, but she put a finger to her lips. "Trust me," she whispered. Before he could argue, she covered him with a thin, shimmering cloth. It felt like silk, but it blended into the ground, hiding him completely. The Velari soldiers passed by. One of them paused, looking toward the root, but then moved on. A minute later, the forest was quiet again. Eli sat up slowly. The alien woman was still there. She looked at him with a calm but serious face. "Who are you?" he asked weakly. "My name is Zira," she said. "I am not your enemy." He didn't believe her at first. Why would a Velari help a human? Zira seemed to understand his doubt. She pointed at the sky. "I saw your ship fall. I know you're hurt. If I leave you here, you'll die. I can help you, but you must come now." Eli looked at his leg. He couldn't walk far on his own. He had no choice. "Okay," he said, barely whispering. Zira gently placed his arm around her shoulders and lifted him. She was stronger than she looked. Together, they moved through the jungle. Zira walked with purpose, avoiding glowing plants and silent traps hidden beneath the leaves. They arrived at a rocky hill covered in vines. Zira pressed her hand against the stone. A hidden door slid open, revealing a small, warm cave lit by soft blue lights. Inside were strange machines and glowing plants. It looked like a mix of science and nature. Zira helped Eli lie down on a bed made of soft moss. She placed a silver patch on his leg. Warmth spread through his body. The pain began to fade. "Rest," she said. "You are safe here, for now." Eli looked at her with tired eyes. "Why are you helping me?" Zira paused, then spoke softly. "Because not all Velari want war. Some of us want peace. And sometimes, peace begins with a choice." Eli's eyes closed, His body relaxed for the first time in hours. Outside, the jungle was still dangerous. The Velari were still searching. But inside the cave, for one night at least, a human and an alien found something rare. A fragile moment of trust. The enemy's shelter. Eli woke up to the sound of water dripping. His eyes blinked open slowly. The pain in his leg was dull now, not sharp like before. Soft blue lights glowed above him, coming from the ceiling of the cave. The air was cool and smelled like herbs and something sweet. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he saw her again, Zira, the alien who had saved him. She stood with her back to him, mixing something in a bowl. Her silver blue skin shimmered under the cave light. Her long white hair was tied back, and she moved with quiet grace. She didn't look like a soldier. She didn't look like someone from a war-torn world. She looked peaceful. Eli tried to sit up but groaned. The pain was still there. Zira turned quickly. "Don't move too fast," she said gently, walking toward him. "Your body is still healing." What is this place?" Eli asked, his voice dry. Zira held a wooden cup to his lips. "Drink this. It will help." He hesitated, then took a sip. The liquid was warm and sweet. It relaxed his chest and throat. "This is my shelter," she said, "hidden from the war. No Velari come here. It is mine alone." Eli looked around. The cave had smooth walls, glowing moss, and strange machines that hummed softly. On one side was a small garden of alien plants. On another side, tools and data pads were stacked neatly. "This doesn't look like a soldier's camp," Eli said, eyeing the place. Zira gave a soft smile. "That's because I am not a soldier. I was a scientist, before the war changed everything." Eli narrowed his eyes. "So why help me? I'm your enemy." Zira didn't answer right away. She sat down beside him, her eyes thoughtful. "Not long ago," she began, "I had a brother. He was a pilot too. He believed in protecting our planet, in fighting for the Velari people. One day, he flew out on a mission and never came back." Eli listened in silence. "I found out later," Zira continued, "that he died in a fight with humans. But when I searched deeper, I learned the truth. He was sent into a trap by our own leaders. They wanted to test a new weapon. My brother was a sacrifice." Her hands trembled slightly. "After that, I stopped believing in the war. I left the army. I built this place. I study life now. I help what I can, even if it's a human." Eli didn't know what to say. In his world, aliens were enemies. He had seen them destroy cities, kill soldiers, tear through defenses. But this one, she had saved him, risked her life. He finally spoke. "I'm sorry about your brother." Zira nodded. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a moment. Then, suddenly, the cave lights flickered. A soft alarm beeped from one of the machines. Zira stood quickly and checked the panel. Her expression grew, but it was Zira. She was breathing hard. Her suit scratched, and her hair was a mess. "You okay?" Eli asked. She nodded. They were close. Too close. I led them away, but they're searching harder now. They found a piece of your ship. They know a human survived. Eli's chest tightened. They'll find this place soon. Zira looked at him. "Then we leave." "Leave? Where?" "There is an ancient passage," she said. "Old Velari tunnels beneath the jungle. They're dangerous, but secret. I can get you to a hidden portal site." Eli frowned. "A portal? It's broken," she admitted, "but I've been trying to repair it. If I can finish it in time, it might send you back to human space." Eli stared at her. "You're risking everything." Zira's voice was quiet. "Some risks are worth it." Eli leaned back against the wall, eyes heavy again. He didn't trust easily. But this alien, this stranger, was becoming more than a savior. She was becoming his only hope. Escape through the night jungle. The jungle waited in silence. It was past midnight when Zira and Eli began their journey. The air was thick and heavy, the sky a deep purple. Strange lights blinked through the tall trees like eyes watching from the dark. Each sound was sharp, rustling leaves, distant growls, the quiet hum of flying creatures. Zira moved ahead with careful steps. Her long fingers touched every root, every branch, as if she could read the forest. Behind her, Eli limped forward, his injured leg wrapped tightly, supported by a makeshift crutch carved from a glowing tree limb. "We can't use normal paths," Zira whispered. "The Velari patrols are everywhere." "How far to the tunnels?" Eli asked, trying not to show how much pain he was in. Zira didn't look back. 3 hours, maybe more, if we're lucky. They passed under thick vines that hung like ropes, dripping soft blue sap. A strange creature watched them from above, blinking 4 glowing eyes, but made no sound. Zira raised her hand. "Stop." Eli froze. She pointed at the ground. "Step around this spot. Carefully." He looked down and saw nothing. But when Zira threw a small stone ahead, the earth hissed, and sharp metallic thorns shot up from below. "Biotrap," she said quietly. "Old Velari defense tech. Still active." Eli swallowed. "Thanks." As they moved forward, he realized something. Zira wasn't just trying to help him. She was guiding him through a land filled with death traps, patrols, and wild creatures. A single mistake could cost them both their lives. And yet, she moved like she belonged to the jungle. Her body knew the path. Her mind read the dangers. But her eyes always stayed ahead, alert, calm. They reached a steep slope, the ground slick with glowing moss. Eli slipped once. Zira caught him before he fell. "You okay?" she asked, breathless. "Yeah," he said, "just not used to walking with a hole in my leg." She smiled briefly. "You're doing well, for a human." They kept walking. Suddenly, the silence broke. A sharp screech echoed through the jungle, followed by a pulse of red light shooting into the sky. Zira's face went pale. "What was that?" Eli asked. "Hunter probe," she said. "They found the cave." Eli's stomach dropped. "Then they're right behind us." Zira nodded. "We have to move faster." They ran. Well, she ran, and Eli tried to keep up, stumbling and pushing forward. His breath burned in his lungs. Pain screamed from his leg. Behind them, in the distance, something big crashed through the trees. Zira turned to him, eyes urgent. "They've sent a Goreth." Eli blinked. "What's a Goreth?" She didn't answer with words. A roar shook the ground, followed by the sound of branches snapping like dry bones. Something massive, something heavy and fast, was chasing them. Zira pulled Eli's arm, guiding him toward a narrow rock pass. Inside, now, they squeezed between sharp stone walls. The creature roared again, unable to follow. For a moment, they both collapsed on the ground, panting. "Zira," Eli gasped, "this is insane." "I know," she said softly. They rested only 2 minutes before moving again. This time, they crossed a dark river glowing with strange fish. Zira held Eli's hand as they walked over a narrow, slippery log. Below, something huge moved in the water, its shadow long and wide. Halfway across, Eli lost balance. He slipped, his foot falling into the river. In a flash, a black tentacle shot out of the water toward him. Zira screamed. She pulled him with all her strength, and the tentacle missed by inches. They fell to the other side, both covered in mud. "You okay?" she asked, breathing hard. Eli nodded, shaking. "What the hell was that?" "Jurek eel," she said. "It eats anything warm." He stared at the river. "I miss Earth." Zira laughed softly. "I don't blame you." They walked again, now slower, more cautious. Finally, after hours of pain, fear, and narrow escapes, They reached a flat area hidden by thick trees. In the center was a stone platform half buried in moss. Strange symbols glowed on its surface. Zira touched a stone on the ground, and a secret panel opened. A soft wind blew upward from the hole, cool, dry, and deep. "The tunnels," she said. "We made it." Eli sighed in relief. "Thank you." But Zira's face was not calm. "We're not safe yet," she whispered. Just then, a voice echoed through the trees, loud, sharp, and clear. "Zira of House Velari, you have betrayed your people. Step forward." Eli turned in fear. A group of Velari soldiers stood in the shadows, weapons raised. In the center stood a tall figure in black armor, glowing with red lines. Zira's eyes widened. "No." Eli looked at her. "Who is that?" Zira's voice broke. "My sister." The soldier removed her helmet. Her face was sharper than Zira's, her eyes cold and full of judgment. "Zira," she said, "you were always the weak one. But this, helping a human, you shame our name." Eli stood beside Zira. "If she wants to help me, then maybe she's the strong one." The sister raised her weapon. "I will take you back, or your body. Your choice." Zira stepped forward, her voice steady. "I won't let you take him." Behind her, the platform lit up. A low hum began to rise. The tunnel was activating. Zira whispered to Eli, "Get inside." "Now, what about you?" he asked. "I'll hold them," she said. "You must live." "No," he said firmly. "We go together." Zira looked at him, and something in her heart cracked open. For the first time, someone was choosing not to leave her behind. She turned to face her sister. "If you want him, you'll have to go through me." Her sister snarled. "Then so be it." The jungle exploded in light as the first energy blasts fired. Zira grabbed Eli's hand, and together they jumped into the tunnel, just as the entrance collapsed behind them. Secrets between enemies. The tunnel was cold. Dark stone walls stretched far into the earth, marked with glowing alien symbols that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. The light came from lines carved deep into the rock, blue and green veins of energy that lit the narrow path. Zira walked ahead in silence, her breathing calm but heavy. Behind her, Eli limped quietly, the wound on his leg bandaged but sore from their escape. Their footsteps echoed off the walls, mixing with the soft hum of the old Velari technology around them. "Is this place abandoned?" Eli asked after a long silence. Zira nodded. "Yes, these tunnels were once used by ancient Velari. Before the war, before we became what we are now." Eli touched one of the glowing walls. The symbols felt warm under his fingers. "What do they say?" Zira stopped and looked back. "It's an old language. This one means journey. And that one," she pointed, "means truth." Eli gave a weak laugh. "Feels fitting. We're definitely on a journey. And the truth, I don't know what to believe anymore." Zira smiled faintly, then turned and kept walking. The path grew narrower. The hum of energy grew louder. After nearly an hour, they entered a wider chamber. The ceiling rose high, like a dome, and in the center stood a tall stone structure, an altar or maybe a control station. On the walls were paintings, faded but still visible. Eli limped toward them. "What are these?" Zira walked beside him, her voice softer now. "They tell stories. My ancestors believed in unity, in balance with life. They built gardens in the sky and oceans underground. They believed life was sacred." Eli traced a part of the wall with his hand. It showed humans and Velari, side by side. "But that's not how it is now," he said. "No," Zira replied, her voice bitter. "Now we fight. We destroy. We follow leaders who use fear and power. We call war honor and peace weakness." Eli looked at her. "Why did you change?" Zira looked at the wall again. "Because my brother died, and I believe the lies." She sat down slowly on a flat stone. I joined the Velari Defense Corps, she continued. I believed I was fighting for peace, but after he died, I found files, reports hidden from the public. My brother's death was not an accident. It was a plan, a test. He was just numbers in someone's experiment. Eli lowered himself beside her. And so you left. Zira nodded. I walked away. I disappeared. I used old codes to hide. I found this tunnel years ago and began building the shelter. I studied healing, plants, energy systems. I thought I could live quietly. She looked at him, her eyes soft. And then you fell from the sky. Eli chuckled. I have a habit of falling into trouble. They sat in silence for a moment. Zira finally asked, What about you? Why did you join the war? Eli leaned back against the stone. I grew up on Mars Base 9. Small colony. My parents were miners, hard-working people. When the Velari destroyed Trade Route 47, my uncle died. He was a supply pilot. I was angry. I wanted justice, so I signed up. Zira nodded slowly. And did you find it? Justice. Eli shrugged. I found orders, missions, explosions. I don't even know what we're fighting for anymore. Borders, resources, pride? He looked at her, and then you saved me. An alien, my enemy. And you've done more for me than most humans would. Zira met his eyes. You're not my enemy, Eli. You're just a man trying to survive. Something shifted between them, soft and invisible, but real. A connection, a fragile thread of understanding. Suddenly, a loud sound echoed through the chamber. Boom, boom, boom. The ground trembled slightly. Zira jumped to her feet. They found the upper entrance. Eli stood too, grimacing from the pain. How far behind are they? Hours maybe, but they won't stop. Zira walked to the altar. She pressed her hand on a panel. A hidden door opened behind the wall, revealing a steep staircase going downward. Come, she said. The portal site is below, but we must hurry. They moved again, this time faster. The air grew colder. The lights dimmed. The tunnel narrowed. After another long walk, they arrived in a chamber unlike any before. It was massive, circular, with a giant ring in the center. The ring was metal, with alien circuits running along its edges. Large cables ran from the floor into the walls. A control station sat beside it, covered in dust and spider-like wires. The portal, Zira said, walking toward it. It hasn't been used in decades. Eli looked at the machine. Can it work? Zira smiled slightly. I've been repairing it for years. Piece by piece. I believe I can finish it now. But I'll need time. Eli nodded. Then I'll buy you time. Zira turned sharply. No, you've done enough. You need rest. But if they come before it's ready. She stepped closer to him. Let me worry about that. You stay near the ring. It's safest here. Eli looked into her eyes. You know, I never thought I'd trust a Velari. She smiled gently. And I never thought I'd risk everything for a human. Eli touched her shoulder. You didn't just save me. You reminded me who I used to be. Zira paused for a moment, then touched her hand to his chest. And you reminded me who I still am. Suddenly, the station blinked to life. The ring lit up, a soft hum filling the air. Zira's fingers moved quickly over the controls. Symbols danced across the screen. Lines glowed. The portal flickered, showing flashes of space. Clouds, stars, a planet far away. Eli's eyes widened. Is that Earth? Yes, Zira whispered. I found the right coordinates. He stared in awe. It's beautiful. She smiled. So are second chances. Then, a blast echoed from the tunnels above. Dust fell from the ceiling. The chamber shook. They're here, Eli said. Zira turned to him. We're out of time. She handed him a small chip. If I don't make it, give this to your people. It holds everything. Proof of the Lari war crimes, records, plans. Maybe. It will help end this war. Eli held it tightly. You're coming with me. But Zero was already at the entrance, blocking the path. She looked back at him, her voice soft. You're safe now, human. Just close your eyes. Eli didn't want to leave, but the portal was glowing, and behind them, shadows were coming. Betrayal at the river's edge. The portal shook with unstable energy. Blue light flashed across the stone walls, casting long shadows behind Eli as he stood near the gateway, heart pounding, pulse racing. Behind him, the ancient ring glowed brighter with every second. Zero's repairs had worked. It was ready. But Zero wasn't by his side. She stood at the tunnel's entrance, her body tall, blocking the narrow stone corridor with her arms outstretched. Her white hair glowed in the dim light, and her silver-blue skin shimmered with sweat and dust. She was alone, but not for long. From the tunnel came the echo of boots, Vilari soldiers in full armor, led by a familiar, cold voice. Zira. Eli froze at the sound. It was Commander Thaley, Zira's older sister. Her voice was sharp like a blade, and when she stepped into the chamber, her red-lined armor gleamed like fresh blood. Soldiers followed close behind, weapons drawn, faces hidden behind glass masks. Zira didn't move. Thaley stopped just a few feet away, her eyes locked on her sister. You've disgraced our family. You've betrayed your people. But I am giving you one last chance. Surrender the human. Return with me. You will still face judgment, but I will ask for mercy. Zira's voice was steady. You don't believe in mercy. Thaley's eyes narrowed. You're right. I believe in order. She glanced at Eli, who now stood behind the portal, watching every move. Your human friend looks weak, Thaley sneered. Barely standing. You've risked everything for him. Zira didn't answer. She didn't need to. Thaley raised her hand. Her soldiers stepped forward. Enough, Zira said. She held up a small device and pressed a button. Instantly, a barrier of energy flashed between her and the soldiers, a glowing wall blocking the tunnel. It wouldn't last long, but it would buy them a few moments. Zira ran to the control panel. Eli, the portal is ready. You need to go. Now. Eli shook his head. Not without you. She turned to him. You promised to give this data to your people. You can stop this war. You can come too. Zira's eyes softened. They'll follow me, Eli. Even if we escape together, they'll keep hunting us. But if only you go, maybe they'll believe you died here. No, he said, stepping closer. You don't have to sacrifice yourself. Before she could answer, a blast hit the energy barrier. It flickered. Thaley's voice rang out again. You always had a soft heart, Zira. And now you'll die because of it. Zira whispered, There's one more way. She turned to Eli and reached for a panel beside the portal. I can give you more than escape. I can mask your life signature, make you invisible to Vilari scans, but I need to connect your body to mine for just a few seconds. Eli blinked. What do you mean? She placed both her hands on his chest. Her palms glowed, and so did his skin. I'm rewriting your energy pattern, she said. You'll be untraceable. The moment her hands touched him, Eli felt something strange. Not just the warmth, but something deeper. A connection. Like his thoughts slowed. Like her feelings were flowing into him. Memories, colors, pain, hope. He saw flashes of her childhood, her brother's smile, a quiet garden, the day she joined the army, the night she cried alone in the shelter. And then it was gone. Zira stepped back, breathing hard. It's done. You're safe. But Eli's hand grabbed her wrist. Come with me, Zira. Please. The barrier cracked. A second blast broke it. Vilari soldiers rushed into the chamber. Blasters raised. Zira turned and stepped in front of Eli. Thalie raised her weapon. Step aside. Zira's eyes burned. No. Then something unexpected happened. One of the soldiers hesitated. He lowered his blaster. Zira recognized him. Lior, a young Villari she had once trained in the healing division. He looked at her, then at Thalie, then at Eli. And for a moment, he didn't move. Lior, Zira whispered, "You know this is wrong." Thalie shouted, "Follow your orders." But Lior dropped his weapon. Others looked at him, confused. The room stood still. Then Thalie screamed in rage and fired. The blast hit Eli square in the chest. Zira screamed. But Eli didn't fall. Instead, the portal behind him absorbed the energy, glowing brighter. His new life pattern, rewritten by Zira, protected him. Zira turned, her eyes wild. "Go. Now." Eli stood still. "Zira." She pushed him back. "Go." Eli stumbled into the ring. The world twisted. Colors spun. Wind howled through the stone chamber. Eli's last sight of her, Zira, standing tall, her arms out, facing her sister and an army. Then he vanished. The chamber went silent. The portal died, and Zira collapsed to her knees. Thalie lowered her weapon, walking toward her sister slowly. "You always cared more for strangers than your own people," Thalie said coldly. Zira looked up at her, pain in her eyes, but no regret. "Because I remembered what it means to feel," she whispered. "Something you forgot long ago." Thalie turned away. "Take her." The soldiers moved forward, but none of them looked proud. Meanwhile, Eli opened his eyes. He was lying in soft grass under a blue sky. Birds chirped. The air was light and warm. He sat up slowly. He was in a human outpost, Earth's safe zone. The portal had worked. Soldiers ran toward him. "Medical team. We have a survivor." Eli didn't speak. He just held the small data chip Zira had given him. Inside it were maps, messages, and secrets, proof of everything. He had made it, but his heart was still underground, in a jungle far away. With her. 1 week later, Eli stood in front of the Earth Alliance command. Behind him, screens showed the data he had shared. The council was silent as the truth played out. Villari leaders planning false attacks, wiped out colonies, innocent lives used as experiments. And a voice recording, Zira's voice. "If anyone finds this, please listen. The war must end. Not all Villari are your enemies. Some of us still remember who we were and who we can be again." When the recording ended, the room was silent. Eli stepped forward. "She saved me," he said. "One Villari, one act of courage, one moment of truth. If she can do that, what's stopping us from doing the same?" The council began to whisper. A new conversation had started, but far away. In a hidden Villari cell, Zira sat alone. Then the door opened. Lior stood there. He didn't speak. He just placed something on the table. A portable communicator. Zira looked up. Lior whispered, "He's alive. The human. He made it." Zira closed her eyes. A single tear fell. The last stand. The stars above Villari Prime burned like cold fire. Inside a high-security cell deep beneath the capital city, Zira sat in silence. Her hands were bound, her body weak, but her spirit still unbroken. The room was small, built with walls that muted sound and light. No windows, no comfort. But she wasn't alone anymore. Across from her stood Lior, the young Villari soldier who had refused to shoot. His eyes were no longer filled with fear, but with purpose. "You don't belong here," he said quietly. Zira looked up. Her voice was hoarse. "Neither do you." He stepped closer. "Your message, it's spreading. Quietly. Soldiers are questioning orders. Healers are speaking out. Even some in command are listening." Zira's heart beat faster. Eli made it. Liar nodded. The humans received the data. He shared your story. The council is shaken. She closed her eyes, relief washing over her like sunlight. Liar leaned in. I can get you out, but there's one condition. Zira opened her eyes. What is it? You have to speak, not just to humans, but to Velari, on the public network. Show them what the war has become. Zira hesitated. If I speak, I'll be hunted. You already are, Liar said. But if you don't, nothing will change. Zira looked down at her hands, bruised but steady. Her voice was soft. Then take me to a transmitter. Hours later, Human Alliance Command Base, Earth. Eli Ward stood on a balcony overlooking the sea. Waves crashed gently below. Children laughed in the distance. It was peaceful, but Eli's heart was still heavy. He had been cleared by medical. The data chip he brought had caused major waves across Earth's leadership. Talks had started. Questions were asked. But nothing had changed yet. No ceasefire. No public response from the Velari government. Just silence. Until that moment, a voice crackled over the main base speakers. Not human. Velari. Eli turned sharply. It was her. Zira's voice. It played across every major network, Earth and Velari alike. This is Zira of House Velari, her voice said, steady and calm. I was a soldier, a scientist, a sister, and I believed in a war built on lies. Images began to appear on the screens, maps, files, stolen recordings. I saw how we were tricked, how leaders used fear to control us. I saw innocent lives, human and Velari, wasted for power. Eli stared at the screen as Zira's face appeared, worn but proud. I met a human named Eli Ward. He should have been my enemy, but he became my reason to hope again. The speech was broadcast everywhere. In Velari cities, workers stopped walking. In space stations, weapons went quiet. On Earth, people gathered in silence. Then her voice changed, stronger now. I am not calling for surrender. I am calling for truth, for voices to rise, for soldiers to lay down arms, for the cycle to break. And then the last words hit like thunder. I will not run. I will stand where I am. If you believe in peace, then stand with me. The screen went black. Velari Prime. Outside the detention tower. Zira stood at the base of the tower with Liar beside her. She had escaped through a side corridor and emerged before anyone noticed. Now she was outside, in the heart of the capital. Guards surrounded her within minutes. Thalie arrived, her eyes cold and furious. You always had a way with drama, she hissed. Zira stood tall. I gave them truth, not drama. You're a traitor. No, Zira replied. I'm the future, and you're afraid of it. Behind her, voices rose. Civilians had begun to gather. Workers, students, even low-ranking soldiers. One by one, more Velari stepped forward. Some held up screens replaying Zira's speech. Some dropped their weapons. And some stood between Zira and Thalie. What are you doing? Thalie shouted at the soldiers. One of them spoke. I won't shoot someone who speaks truth. Another stepped back. Then another. Thalie's face twisted in rage. You think this changes anything? Zira stepped forward. Slowly. It already has. A drone hovered above them, broadcasting the scene live. Zira raised her hand to the camera. To all watching, we don't need leaders who burn the future to protect their past. We need each other. A single shot rang out. Everyone froze. Eli blinked at the screen on Earth. No. Zira stumbled. Blood ran down her side. Thalie's blaster smoked. I warned you, Thalie said coldly. Zira dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped, but didn't move. Until someone did. Liar rushed forward. He held Zira up, placing a healing pack on her wound. We stand with her, he shouted. One soldier raised his voice. For unity. Another. For peace. And then 1,000 voices rose. In every city, on every base, Valari stood up. Soldiers refused orders. Scientists marched. Pilots grounded their ships. The chain had snapped. The war had cracked. 3 days later, Joint Human Valari Medical Base. Eli entered the room slowly. Zira lay in bed, pale but breathing. Monitors beeped softly beside her. Her wound had been serious, but not fatal. She opened her eyes and smiled weakly. "You always find a way back," she whispered. Eli smiled. "So do you." He sat beside her, holding her hand. The broadcasts changed everything. The Valari Council fell. Humans paused all military ops. Talks have started. Zira's eyes filled with quiet hope. "Then maybe we did it," she said. "Not just us," Eli replied, "but we lit the fire." They sat in silence, hand in hand. Zira looked out the window at the stars. "Do you think we'll ever trust each other completely?" she asked. Eli followed her gaze. "Maybe not today, but someday." He leaned closer. "And when that day comes, I'll be right here. Home again, but changed forever." The war didn't end with an explosion. It ended with silence. The kind of silence that followed centuries of violence, the kind that made people listen for the first time. A silence filled with questions, with fear, with hope. It began with Zira's broadcast, continued with Liar's defiance, and it reached its peak when soldiers on both sides refused to fight. In the following days, the stars witnessed something rare. A joint Valari human peace delegation was formed. Warships were recalled. Propaganda broadcasts were shut down. For the first time in decades, the skies were clear, not of clouds, but of threats. And in the heart of it all, 2 names kept spreading like wildfire through both galaxies. Zira of House Valari, and Eli Ward, the human pilot who fell from the sky. 3 months later, Earth Alliance Garden Dome. Eli walked across soft grass under a glass dome that stretched into the clouds. Below the clear ceiling, sunlight shone on flowers from Earth, Mars, and Valari Prime. Children played by a small pond, laughing as fish darted under the water's surface. It felt like another world. Because in many ways, it was. Eli wore no uniform now, just a plain shirt, a healing patch still wrapped around his ribs, and a necklace that held a small silver disc, the chip Zira had given him. The data that had changed everything. As he walked, people nodded, smiled. Some even thanked him. He didn't feel like a hero. He had bled. He had almost died. But what haunted him more than the near-death moments were the memories of trust. Trust earned from someone he was raised to hate. He reached a small platform near the lake. There, sitting under a tree, was Zira. Her silver-blue skin glowed gently under the filtered light. She wore simple white robes, the Larry style, with no rank or symbol. Her hair was tied back, but a small braid fell across her shoulder, a sign of peaceborn status in Valari tradition. Eli smiled. "You're early." Zira looked up and returned the smile. "You're always late." He sat beside her, knees cracking a little. "I thought I was getting better." "You are," she said, "but pain takes its time. So does healing." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the water. "I still have dreams," Eli said quietly. "The jungle, the tunnel, that moment before I stepped through the portal, when I thought I might never see you again." Zira's eyes softened. "I have dreams too. Of stars burning. Of my sister's eyes right before she shot me." She looked down. "Thalie has disappeared. No one knows where she went. Some say she's hiding. Others say she went off-world." Eli nodded. "People like her don't just fade away." "No," Zira said, "but the world around them does." She looked around at the garden. This wasn't possible before. A Valari sitting beside a human, watching children play, listening to peace. Eli glanced at her. You made it possible. She shook her head. We did. That afternoon, Unity Forum, Earth Valari Embassy. The Grand Hall was filled with delegates, scientists, soldiers, and survivors. On the walls hung symbols from both planets. A new banner fluttered in the center, a white flame rising from soil, the symbol of rebirth. Zira stepped onto the stage. Her voice broadcast live across two worlds. 3 months ago, she said, I stood in chains. My own sister held a weapon to my chest, and many of you saw me as a traitor, but I am not here to speak of betrayal. She paused, letting silence settle. I'm here to speak of truth, the truth that all of us, human and Valari, were lied to. We were told that war made us strong, that violence made us pure, that unity was weakness. She looked into the crowd, but I saw something stronger. I saw it in a man who should have hated me, a man who stood by me even when death was only inches away. A human, a pilot, a friend. She looked toward Eli. He stood in the back of the hall, his hand over his heart. Zira continued, I speak to you now, not as a leader, not as a soldier, but as a survivor. And I ask one thing, don't let our pain be wasted. Don't let our stories be forgotten. Applause erupted across the hall. A new path had begun. Later that night, shoreline, Pacific coast, Earth. Eli and Zira walked barefoot on the sand. The stars above were brilliant, untouched by ships or war for the first time in decades. I used to dream about oceans, Zira said softly. I studied them in pictures, watched Earth videos. But this, I never imagined it would smell like this. Eli laughed, salty and fresh. She nodded, smiling. They sat near a rock, waves brushing their feet. Zira reached into her robe and pulled out a small object, a Valari pendant made of crystal and steel. I want you to have this, she said. Eli shook his head. That's your family emblem. I don't need it anymore, she said. It represents a house that fell. But maybe, in your hands, it can represent something rising. He took it slowly. Thank you. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Zira whispered, Do you think this peace will last? Eli looked up at the stars. I think peace is like flying. You never really know how long it will hold. You just keep your wings steady and pray the wind doesn't change. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I like that. 1 year later, United Planetary Academy, Earth orbit. Eli stood before a group of young recruits, humans and Valari alike. Behind him, a giant screen displayed star charts, diplomatic missions, and rescue protocols. Zira walked beside him, wearing a robe of pale gold, now an ambassador of peace, teaching science, culture, and ethics. Together, they told stories of jungle paths, broken machines, ancient tunnels, and glowing rivers, of betrayal and survival, of a whisper in the forest. You're safe now, human. Just close your eyes. The garden again. A young girl with glowing eyes ran across the grass, laughing as she chased a small drone. Behind her, 2 parents sat together, one with silver blue skin, the other with earth-born eyes and quiet strength. Zira looked at Eli. Think she'll ever believe how we met? Eli laughed. Probably not. Zira smiled, watching their daughter dance through the flowers. But we'll tell her anyway.